Thank you, Richard and Joyce Jenkins, for making this festival possible. Yay. I'm going to read some of these prose poems, and I wanted to write very simple sentences, very plain, nothing fancy. And they are all accompanied by my drawings. And this first one is called After 20 Years. One night, when I was depressed, I asked for a sign. I stood on a cliff and watched 2 deer step onto the beach below. Their hooves clinked when they crossed the shale, and when they walked up the beach, their hoofprints filled with seawater. Each pool held a moon. I tried to understand what it meant as kelp washed back and forth and the sea breathed below me. It's all gone now, who I longed for, what I felt. All I remember are those 30 or 40 moons shining. You know, I really don't remember what was bothering me. And I was young, and I thought at the time I was important and nature was a backdrop. And very shortly after that, I realized I'm not important. I'm the backdrop, and nature is the main event. I hike a lot at night, so this one is about that. It's called Feeling the Presence of Pan. One night on a cliff, I asked a question about my life and heard a screech owl call. A mountain lion yowled in the valley below, and there he was, Pan. He wasn't benevolent like Jesus holding out his hands, but he wasn't evil either. He was just alive and startling, like the sound of antlers clanking in the dark. One of my favorite things to do when I'm outside is to try and become what I'm looking at. So if I'm drawing or writing, I try to throw my consciousness inside of a tree or a river and feel its life from the inside out. So this time, in this case, it was my car. Toyota under the full moon. For a moment, I felt as if its iron was longing to go back to the ground it came from, wanted to pull apart from its alloy, remembered the roots and root hairs, wanted to be touched by the small, familiar grains of soil. So you never really know what your car is thinking. I'm going to read a couple of lost poems, and this is called What Remains. The last time I called my grandmother on the phone, she sounded preoccupied, as if she were listening to something she alone could hear. I've forgotten almost everything about her funeral. All I remember now are the bees that pollinated the wreath on her coffin, flying from pistil to pistil as it sank. And this one is called Leaves. In the weeks after my sister's death, all I wanted to do was hike, look at some leaves, thimbleberry, columbine. I was so tired of the blade of my own mind. And thank you. And this one is another night poem. It's called Owl. Feeling sad after a breakup, I went for a walk in the fog. The trees looked blurred, and the moon seemed covered with gauze. I laid down on a slope. I could smell tarweed, and once in a while, the ocean. I was wearing a gray beret that looked like fur, and I folded my hands on top of it. Something sharp and cold brushed my fingers. An owl. She must have thought my hat was an animal. Her talons struck for an instant, then moved on. So I want to say, after that happened, I went home and I thought, that relationship is toast. That was a pretty clear sign. I'm going to read a couple of environmental poems from my last book, Swerve. And this one is about the starfish that were dying along the West Coast. They have recovered now somewhat. It's called Lesions. Whenever a species gets stubbed out like this, I feel the border of our lives is fraying. The map of the sea yanked blank in one corner. Sometimes I think we're holding the diameter of the earth in our hands, an elastic band stretched tight, and we're living in the years before it snaps back and tosses animals and trees and us away. Maybe we should write a letter to those people of the future. Here is the earth. Love it for us. It's hard to believe, but we loved it too. And this next poem is an answer to that. I, like everybody, get very discouraged, but I do think it's important to remember our victories. And when Rachel Carson was trying to ban DDT, it seemed really impossible that she would ever do that. The pesticide industry was just too powerful. And yet she did it. And because of her, we have the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Wilderness Act, the Endangered Species Act. So one woman taking action. And I think about that. It's important to remember we have done this before and we can do it again. We just need to take action. So this poem is called Not Too Late. The blackberry leaves that turn silver when they flip over in the wind. No, there is still time. The charred trunks are still alive under the scorched bark. The corals have not been completely bleached. Newts still float languidly in the pond, and beetles, who have always carried the sun on their backs, carry the minutes. The mites are lugging the seconds over the cold grains of soil. Grasshoppers move toward us with their ears on their bellies, as if they were listening to the future. The cardinals are fluttering. The egrets are strutting toward us in their elegant way. They are bringing us platters of time and laying them down in front of us. The hawks carrying ours in their talons and letting them fall. The ocean with its clumps of foam, delivering the weeks and months, and even the snakes curling around the strength of the time that's left. And I'm going to end, thank you, that's great, Kirk. I'm going to end with 3 love poems, and I realize even though I write romantic poems, they all seem to end up to be about nature, so it's just something I can't stop writing about. The first one is called Flock. He knew that sex sometimes scared me, and that I loved birds. And so when we were about to make love the first time, and I stepped out of the bathroom naked, I saw he'd lined the floor around the bed with small porcelain statues, sparrows, cardinals, hummingbirds, doves. Arrival. I couldn't wait for him to walk in the door, so I ran to his car, and we hugged so hard we crushed the daffodils he'd brought. The cellophane crinkled against my ribs. He wouldn't let go. Finally, we went into the kitchen, and I put the flowers in a vase and thanked him. At work, he mixed concrete, but when he came to see me, he carried Jergens lotion in his car. All day long, I touch cement. I want my hands to be soft when I touch you. And this last one is called Proximity. One day I went to the city where he was working on a construction job. There was no chance of meeting him. He was on a deadline, but I thought, he's here. My body knew he was only a few blocks away. I thought about him measuring beams or lengths of electrical cable, or taking a break, eating a tomato sandwich. I felt radiant. The same sun that shone on my hair shone on his. Thank you so much.